Okay. I'm live. Haven't been in a long time. Uh, and I don't really um it's been a long time since I was live. So I guess I should have a spiel about it. I'll put it in the link in the Discord as well. Um I just have been very tired, unmotivated, and so I haven't had a stream in a long time. Um, which also means that I haven't really worked on this in a long time, which, you know, is a bummer, but it is what it is. And I'm not also, saying that I'm, finished with it. The past 3 days I've gotten up, sat here, and then thought about it, and then just not done it because, to be honest, I'm just not in a good mood. And I think watching somebody reluctantly work on things just, is not something that I would enjoy watching. And so I'm going to try not to be negative about it today, but it's part of the reason why I haven't been live. Hey, Arya. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, to be honest, but yeah, I'm just super tired all the time. So don't really know why. But yeah, maybe that my body has just gotten used to the medications that I'm on, and so I may have to go and have that changed. I mean, that's what's going to happen, but the issue with that is that it's takes 4 to 8 weeks, till I see my psychiatrist again and again and again. And then after that, it's going to be another 8 weeks, and then another 8 weeks, every time I need to change something, which, it sucks, but that's just kind of how it works. Like, your body just kind of gets used to it, and then you have to, come with your notes on it or whatever, and then they make the inference or whatever. So, but yeah, I haven't done anything at all on this. I've just been watching movies and chilling out. I showed my family some of my favorite movies recently. And that's been cool. It's been cool because my dad's like a painter, and it's been really cool to hear his takes on some of my favorite films. I showed them Pulse and Deep Red. It was cool to talk about, all the composition and the symbolism. Interesting to hear some of his things that he noticed in them that I didn't really notice, and it was really cool to be able to gush about a film to someone else, since these are films that I've actually written papers on, so that was cool. But yeah, other than that, I haven't really done, any research on anything that I'm supposed to do here. Last time I was live, what I did was I did the stencil buffer outlines for NPCs, for entities, and that works. That works perfectly. Yeah, I haven't even used this keyboard in a while. So if I can go to where I implemented that just to where is this? It's been a while since I've even looked at this. It would have to be, well, it's probably best to go into render scene new. It's going to be under, oh, it's actually in the shader thing, right? So it's in a bind shader program. I hard coded this basically, right? So if we have this stencil compare function, then what we did here was I hard coded that if the material properties were a certain number, then the position would be shifted to the right a little bit and then shifted to the left a little bit. What this does is it gets basically both. I can show it better if we actually compile here. Or not compile, but just show it off. A C exam tomorrow. Watching you has to be productive, right? I mean, that's awesome that you have a C exam. I hope that I don't think that my C is going to help you with your exam. Unfortunately, I'm just not that good with it. But so this is how it looks. So basically, what we do here is that what I did is that I shifted up in Z to the right in X, and then back in Y, and then I do it the opposite way. And the effect of this is that you basically shift it in both directions so that you get both sides of the model. So that's what it looks like. You can also change the color in the shader. What is this? What is this called? How are we doing this? Entity mesh, right? Yeah. So we can change it to white. I don't really remember which component flag is, but I had two different ones just to test out if we could do two different colors. And the ones over here are going to be yellow, right, with the other component flag. Now what I can do is I can show off, I can just hot load the shaders and show off that they can be different colors. So I'll do that right now. If I can remember, oh, this is in this menu. No, it isn't in this menu. Which menu is this in? Entity mesh reload shader. Yeah, so now they're both white, which is what I just did. So in the shader, you can change the color. And that's what it looks like. Is if the component flag is 1, then it's white, and if it's not, then we'll just put it to red just to show off. I think that it's super cool that you can do this. It is a bit hard coded in, but I guess we can work on a system that that doesn't hard code it. But yeah, that's what this looks like. It's a pain to do this. We ran into a lot of bugs with it. Apparently, so for some reason, the stencil attachments don't really just work on their own, or the stencil attachments don't work on their own. What I had to do was I had to make a stencil buffer and whatchamacallit, a depth buffer in one texture. because for some reason, just creating a stencil was giving me OpenGL errors, and I couldn't figure out why, and I still don't know why. But yeah, now it's all in one. Also, something really frustrating about getting this set up was that for whatever reason, and this is really annoying, and was what I spent like many hours on last time, was that setting this up with the stencils was very, very confusing, because you can't GL enable or GL disable GL stencil test like you can GL depth test. For whatever reason, if you don't have stencil test on, then you cannot clear the stencil buffer. So you have to always have it on, and so I have this GL enable here, and this just keeps it always enabled when we're clearing it. Usually, what you would be able to do is, at least from what I understand with the depth testing, is that you can clear while it's not enabled. Like you could just do this and then GL clear it and it's fine. But yeah, so I was like really scratching my head on that last time. And all of this, like I was copying all this code, and I basically just like really played around with stuff until it worked. But I finally got it working. It was a very frustratingly long stream, to be honest. Because of that, though it should have been something pretty simple to implement, to be honest. I'm trying to see, there was something that we did here where, so base, by the way, is the NPC entity, the test one, and then you can see the sort 99 and sort 98. That's what we hard coded to submit the different colors or the different positions. I'm just trying to see. Okay, so stencil test is 1 here, mask is 0, and we set it to not equal. I don't remember what any of this does since it's been a couple of weeks. I'm just trying to remember how there was something that I did on the pass after to maybe clear it. I put it here. Stencil test, stencil mask, GL always, GL front and back. And then I don't touch it again. For some reason, this was important. I remember this. I remember having to do something here. Keep, replace. Keep, replace. It's all keep, replace. It's GL always. That's what it is. I had to set this after I render the stencil. I have to set the compare function to GL always. And I think it's because when I clear it, it has to be GL always. And I'm not sure why that particularity kind of exists. But I kind of want to test. If I comment this out. I don't want to break anything here, but I want to kind of test if I comment that out, and instead I just, because I'm setting it to GL always here before I clear it. So hopefully, I mean, that shouldn't be necessary, right? I don't know. Yeah, I think that this was so the GL always thing basically means that it's always going to pass, I think. And so that means that it always gets drawn over the stencil. And so I thought like GL stencil mask would be fine. I almost wonder if I need to do this. I always wonder if I need to hard code that in. Oh, I need to compile. What am I doing? What am I doing? Yeah, so my plan for today was to work on game save and load, which I haven't touched in a long time. So I don't know how that's gonna work out. I think so. I know what it needs to look like, but I don't know. You know what challenges I'm gonna run into with it. I know basically what it's going to look like is that we're gonna have a. We're basically when we write to a file, we're just going to write a bunch of asset locations. Okay, yeah, so this broke things. For sure. For sure. Huh. Hold on, let me think about this more. I think it's probably has to do with this. With this being before. Yeah, sorry, I don't really remember how this works. My understanding of it was already fairly limited. Right, so mask 0 is where we write it. Mask 1 is where we draw the character. But if stencil test is 1, then we're always going to set it, then we're going to set it, okay. Okay, let's try this. Because now it's not going to be overwriting itself when we draw the stenciled thing. Because what it was this, and so what it ended up doing was this overwrote that when we were drawing the red outline. But yeah, I just want to figure out how to do this because then I don't have to keep this weird thing in a pass after just so that it clears it, you know. That's a bit weird. Okay, so this works fine. I'm not really sure why it works. It's like an OpenGL kind of quirk, I guess. That's you have to have it with certain parameters. When you clear it, it clears it out to different values. I think it clears the texture out or what have you to a different value. So you need to set it to that. And you also need to set it to this GL stencil function to GL always for every pass that happens after. What I tried to do with this was I tried to do GL disable GL stencil test, which is how it works with depth testing, is that you can just enable and disable it. However, that just doesn't work for stencils for whatever reason. This just doesn't work. And I don't know why. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, this makes so much more sense. It's just like, you disable stencil testing, it should not use the stencil at all. However, I can kind of show off here that this isn't going to work. And that's why I was confused for a long time. But yeah, I mean, it turns out that I think that that's just the truth, because looking back at it, I did notice that the OpenGL example doesn't have that as well, the enabling and disabling it. Did this just work? Hold on. I want to see if, because the trees are drawn after. Maybe this does work. Okay, well, maybe I'm just talking a bunch of nonsense, and that does work. Okay. Fair enough. Then maybe we just do that instead. Huh. I could have sworn that was what was bringing us pain last time. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something completely different. Yeah, so this is what was happening, was that it would basically just draw black over what was stenciled. Okay, so this just works. The enable and disable just actually works, and we don't have to do that weird workaround with it. I don't know why that's the case, but yeah, so this stencil op thing, I hard-coded this as well, didn't I? This is at the top of our render pass. I hard-coded it. Whoops. I hard-coded it here. So we can stop hard-coding it now, I think, and just put it here. And hope that that works, and then once that works, then we can stop looking at this and move on, I think. We are leaving it in kind of a place where it is hard-coded a bit, though, because of what we submit in the shaders here. This is still ultimately, like, just a really sketchy... Oh my gosh, my headphone cable is scrolling my mouse wheel. How could I do this not hard-coded? Honestly, I mean, this sounds a bit over-engineered, but entities could have a component of per instance, I guess, data that needs to get sent to the render group with it. I'd have to kind of look at the structure of the code. Okay, so this seems fine. It seems like it's working fine. Let me check the other color. Yep, works fine. Works absolutely fine. Okay. Beautiful. Thanks, Albert. I appreciate that. LSD vibes. Thanks. I have partaken in my fair share of acid to the point where I have HPPD now. So that's possibly why it's a bit trippy. It's kind of the whole point of it. Yeah, so new composed TRS from vectors. Okay, so basically what this is doing is it makes a new matrix and then submits that for the colored stencil around the characters. And so if we want to abstract this away so that it's not hard-coded, what we'd have to do is probably have either the entity have a callback that does this, or a component on the entity have a callback that does this. And so I think maybe we make a render component for entities so that per entity we can have code that gets executed during the this bind shader program thing. And that will also be important because we're already hard coding this U model from our entity TRS. And so instead of any of this, what it would look like would be like we would go instance data and to just call the function that submits all of this per instance data. We should go to where that instance data is defined, though. I don't really remember this at all. Render instance data. It's a struct with an asset, a skin, and an entity ID. And I think that it's basically what it is we have slots on each render group for a certain amount of instances that entities submit their data into, which happens submit entities to render groups. It's this function. It happens here. Bruh, anime. What anime? Is there something anime? What anime? Yeah, so this basically, every frame we clear these array of these instances that live on the groups, and then we go through per entity and then do this, right? And then it just basically gives the render group, this is this entity's data, so that when we render it, we can render it correctly. And I'm just trying to figure out if this callback function should be per entity or per render group. Like, maybe this isn't inside of render instance data, but rather it's just straight on the render group. I don't really know the answer to that. What it would come down to is if you want different entity instances to have different callback functions. I think, yeah, you would. And you would want them to have their own values as well. And the reason why is because you want like the 98 here, which is like the green NPCs, to have this, or we do that in the shader actually, but we still have to submit this component flag. And here as well, we submit this component flag that's per entity. We go to NPC component to get that. So maybe it doesn't have to go inside of here. Maybe it just lives on the entity itself. So like an entity gets a or I suppose we could just put it on the render group, but because I know that we draw twice, right? We draw twice here. I'm not sure why we draw twice. Oh, because of the sort. Because we draw right and then we draw left. And there is really no way around that. But that is per render group, that isn't per instance. And so yeah, you do want it to be per render group. Because you want it to switch on this. You want to have a callback that does it to the right and then to the left. And that's not per entity instance data, that's per render group data because we're drawing it twice. So yeah. Okay. Okay. So how do we implement that? I have a feeling that we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, though, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole right now, to be honest. So let's try to implement this very simply and not get carried away. This callback was it's kind of deprecated by now. What it was it was basically like when a render pass needs a specific function where it draws, and where I was using that, I don't know if we still are using that, but where I was using this was, oh, we do use it here, group callback override function. Is it calls this override function instead of the draw function. The reason behind that was because we had our map editor was using kind of a different draw buffer thing, and so it had to have its own function to draw. Now I don't think that that's necessary. I think that we have implemented everything that this does, and so I don't even know if we're using this anymore. I don't think that we are, because I believe our draw buffer for those editor triangles is no longer separate. So that's what this callback data is. Let me just test if that's in use. Because we can just like get rid of that and then make a new callback binding for the shader data. So what that would have broken is, oh, it did break it. Yeah, it did. Okay. Yeah, it's giving me a bunch of errors. Okay. So this is in use. This override function is still in use. That is render selected triangles. That's what this does. Oh yeah, this is important. Yeah, this code is a mess, by the way. Reason why this was a thing was because basically in one draw buffer is all of the data for points that you've selected, lines that you've selected, and triangles that you've selected. And also different handling for if you're hovering in point selection mode, in line selection mode, or in triangle selection mode. So basically a point would hover a point, a line would draw that line, and when these are the selections inside of your buffer. And so that's why this is a thing. So I suppose that needs to stay as a thing, and we can't get rid of that. But yeah. Okay, so but we need to make another. So this is the draw function. That's what this callback is, and this render callback is a draw override callback. I'm wondering if we should just put it inside of here. We've override function and function. I'm wondering, yeah, we should probably just put it inside of here for simplicity. I'm just gonna do this. How long does it take me to build this? You're talking about the engine, in total. A long time. I don't really remember when I started. You can check my channel for the first video I made on it. But many months and many hours. You know, I think Aria gave me a number of how many hours I've streamed in the past few months. I think it was something over 500 or something like that. Something crazy like that. So yeah, a long time. But yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what this is. I don't really remember. I have to go to where I create the render groups to figure that out. To go to here, I generate the render groups, and I bind the functions somewhere here. Where is this? Generate render group. Bind draw command. Resolve render group callback. That's what it is. Takes a group and a material. Fair. Where is this? Where is this defined? Here. Okay. Oh, this is just awful naming convention. Resolve render group callback, resolve render callback. This is what it calls. That's awful. We're not gonna. Let's not worry about it right now. Okay. So what I'm seeing is that this is per material. Oh, this is in here. Group material. And then it goes from the material bind function. Okay. Which is a string. Okay, so that's what I had. Okay, so in this case, for our stenciled thing, what I would put here is stencil left and stencil right. And then we will retrieve it and then resolve it. And then this is the resolve. We just copy over the functions. From whatever we retrieve. Void pointer G. Okay. It's great that you at least have passionate to build something like that. To be age, I want to get advanced C++, but it's hard to understand. Yeah, I mean... Yeah, I mean, I only know C. I don't really know C++. My advice would just don't be too concerned about doing things the right way and just do them. Because if you spend too much time just trying to do things the right way or the way that other people do them, then you're not going to do anything at all. But what do I know? I hate giving advice because it's like, well, what have I done? You know? It's like, I don't know. I'm definitely not the person that you should be taking advice from. Also, this needs to be obviously changed. to this. Wait, what? Wait, what? This isn't the bind function? No, it isn't the bind function. What am I talking about? Override function, that's what I called it. Okay. And then this is a bind self is the Boolean. And then I don't remember what the rest of these are. This is the data, the bind function, and the free data function that frees whatever is bound. Trying to think how to explain what I'm doing here. Basically, this is a structure that's flexible, like a callback structure, that basically has a function that allocates data and then can free that data, coupled with a function that uses that data, if that makes sense. And obviously a function that allocates it and a function that frees it, right? So that's what this is. So once again, stencil left and stencil right for this. And this is not going to have an override function. The override function is the draw call override. Instead, it's going to have a function that is called. It's actually a good point. Thanks. I appreciate that you find it useful. I don't know. If you want to do what I do, which is, you know, just sit here and work on something for an infinite amount of time, then, you know, I get a lot of people in here that are like, you know, how do you make this? Oh my gosh, you know, and I don't know. For better or for worse, what's always separated me from other people is that I don't like doing things the correct way. Because I don't know. That shit is boring. So this is, where's our other? We should put it in the same place. This render selected triangles. We should put it render selected triangles. Where is this? This is oh god. Okay, so let's not put it there. Shader bind function. We want to put this in. Let's just put it above here, to be honest. So what this is it's functions that submit data to the shader per render group. So this is going to be what are we calling this? I'm gonna go shader stencil left. And then these are two different functions that are going to do what we hard coded. So let's go here and navigate to where that is. And that's in bind shader program. It's this. Okay, so we need to cast this to there. Oh gosh. It's been a while since I've used the keyboard. Okay, so we need to go through and change the name for all of this stuff, just to suit the naming convention. Okay, and the rest is shader. Okay, so how do we get the shader from the render group? You could literally just find it again, the same way that we find it here. We don't find it here. We don't find it here at all. We find it here is where we find it. We find it like globals.shaders.buffer group shader index. That's what it is. Okay. So the shader, I just don't want to be passing too much random stuff into here. I'd rather just like keep it here. Yeah, I'm sorry if I mess up typing a lot today. Haven't really programmed in a while. Okay, shader. So that's how we get the shader, and then the instance data comes straight from the render group. It should be. The issue with this is that it's not per group. This is per instance. And so we do need to submit this to this function. We do. So how do we want to design this? How do I learn to structure my code? To be honest, by just structuring a lot of code, you know? I didn't really read a book on it, or anything like that, though I'm sure that there are a lot of good books on it that I would probably enjoy. But I suck at taking the time to read stuff. what I would say is that think about the problem and think about what is the way to solve the problem that you won't kick yourself later for designing it that way. Like, for example, what I'm doing right now is I'm thinking about, I have this call oh, excuse me. I have this callback function that is getting put on render groups that when we bind the shader program is sending data to the shader. And that data basically takes, for this specific thing, it takes in the entity model matrix and then it modifies it and then sends it to the shader. The issue is that we have to get which entity we are rendering, and those are found in instances that are on the render group. However, we don't know which instance we are rendering because this happens in a loop here. So basically, we have to think of, we can do it one of two ways, or three ways actually, right? And so we can keep this void pointer, just one thing that we're sending to this. And the reason why this is this way is because when you have a callback function in C, you have to have the function signature like this, right? You have to have it like this, you know, if there's two things that you're passing into it. Or if it's one thing, you do this. And so there's a couple ways of designing this, right? We could just literally hard code it, right? And say, this is what we're doing for this function signature. And the second argument is going to be an int that specifies the instance number that we are rendering. We could also pass in just straight up the render instance data. It's giving me an error because this is unknown by here, but yeah, you get the point with that. We could also just send a pointer to the render data so that we know which entity to grab. Or the third most inconvenient way, the way I think I would have done it if it was the old me, was I would have made a another struct that is called like shader render data that has inside of it a render group pointer and a that, and then what this would be that it would be held inside of this data variable. So that I would have a bind function that allocates this structure, and then a function that frees this structure, and then this would live in this data variable, and then this would be passed into here. And the reason why is because I like to keep things as kind of not hard-coded as possible. So that's why, because I want this function signature to not have this int in here, you know. But yeah, that's how I would have done it back in the day. But I don't think that new me is gonna be doing that. Do my eyes not hurt from this font? No. What's the code editor? This is Helix. Helix sees nuts. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, new me is definitely not going to to do that because it's just very, yeah. What are we mad about? Am I doing this wrong? Am I stupid? I think I'm stupid. Oh yeah, I didn't put type def. What am I doing? Am I really, really dumb? What am I missing here? Oh. That's what I'm missing there. Okay. There, that's fine. Okay, so there we go. The other way, the fourth way to do it, which I'm now thinking of, is that this function could live on the render instance data. And therefore we wouldn't have to really worry about submitting something else, but I would have to make another callback structure to do that, and that's lame. That's my mental model in general in terms of memory / lifetime. Do I use arena allocation or something similar? I do it a couple of ways. Some things are arenaed. Like entities are eventually just going to be arenaed. Some things I don't really think too hard about. But I try to allocate everything on load time rather than during runtime, obviously. I try not to allocate anything during runtime. For example, all my UI, I allocate the maximum amount at load time. And then just use that memory when we're hiding or, showing UI elements. And so that's like the model that everything's in. That maximum amount is defined by a count of menus, So if you have 10 different menus, then I just allocate the maximum amount of UI elements and text boxes for those menus. And that is also what I allocate, obviously, in the VBO and the SSBO, that it's all abstracted away in. So that's kind of how everything works, is that I have some number that is given to me of how much I need to allocate, and then we allocate that, and I only allocate if that vertex data needs to be changed, which is this re-upload dirty render groups. That's what this does, is it goes through all of our render groups and it finds if we have a dirty flag, and then simply here it checks if the byte buffer is less than the current capacity, Um, and then if we have something to upload, then we upload this data, or we uh or we null it out. And then if our count is greater than or equal to our current capacity, what that means is that we need to expand its capacity. And so I call reupload VBO render groups for a certain VBO. And what this does is it reuploads all the groups for that VBO because the capacity of this one section has increased. This capacity is defined by 2 times the initial size of the byte buffer on initialization. So let's say you have some geometry or whatever, that some model that you upload into a VBO. What I do is I allocate 2 times that size, and so I only subdata inside of that, right? And then if we exceed that size, then I need to basically change everything inside of that VBO. Now I have to re-upload everything. So that's basically the overall structure of how the memory works. How often does this happen? Not often at all, obviously, because, for example, animation is all done with matrices on the GPU. The only case for this would be if you had something that you were, for example, editing some geometry, some model in your map editor. None of this would happen during game time or during runtime because per vertex data is not typically changing during runtime. But even if it was, you would have to have more than double of the vertices to trigger this, you know? And subdating one model, you know, it's nothing. This is nothing, right? But yeah, this function, for example, I call this when you're editing text and stuff like this in editor mode and stuff like that. Is this game only going to be available in Windows? I'm on Linux right now, so probably not. I don't really know about the Mac portability of it. I haven't really investigated it, but I feel like it probably can't be too difficult, right? At the end of the day, it's just the file system stuff that's difficult to translate per OS, as far as I understand. But going from Windows to Linux was pretty simple. It's the year of the Linux desktop. Yeah, I guess so. I honestly was considering going back to Windows almost. Just because there's some stuff that I can't run on Linux, which is like kind of frustrating me. I love Linux, but honestly, if I had like a better computer with more space, I would dual boot, because I really don't like, I can't use Ableton, for example. I can't I can't use Premiere, which is what I used to edit in. So yeah, it's not like I like Adobe at all as a company, but the tools on Linux are, you know, worse, to be honest. I mean, even though there are plenty of people that will tell you otherwise, I disagree with them fully. I do really enjoy Linux, but yeah. Anyway, long tangent about the memory. Sorry about that, but yeah. Okay, so what I was doing was so we're not going to do this per instance. No, we're going to do this per render group. And so we will just pass in dot. Okay. Not sure what all of this debug stuff that's commented out is. Have to import this. Compose TRS from vectors. Where's this? This is in GLTFC. Oh my gosh. You can tell when I haven't coded in a while because I forget where the pound sign is. Can I tell you more about how entities work? Well, there's a lot, baked into that question. There's the component stuff. There's, entity, creation and stuff like that. So, basically, the entity struct is massive. There's a lot of stuff on the entity struct, which is probably like not what you're supposed to do, and probably something that I'm gonna have to change. But basically, how it works is you load in a file, for example, a GLTF, and when you load in that GLTF, it looks if there is a pre-existing entity definition that tells the engine what data we should initialize it to, and obviously that has a callback that that's like per entity. This is what it can live on this entity, right? And that also sets up the different components that live on it and allocates that. Or not allocates it, but assigns it. Right, assigns those pointers. And that happens when an entity is initialized. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, that's basically how it works, is when you load in a file, it binds on that asset a certain definition that when we create instances of that asset, then that's how we initialize each entity's data to. Then you have all of that entity data that has pointers, obviously, to all of its different components, which right now there aren't that many components because I don't think that it's necessary. It's not necessary for my engine, for what I'm doing, to have a physics component, to have, a ton of bloat that isn't necessary right now for how things work. But yeah, that's what it has. So that's how it works. And like everything in my engine right now, it basically, everything lives until it is replaced. So when an entity is destroyed, what it actually happens is that it is set to inactive, and then when we create another entity, then we just use that slot, right? And so on each entity, there's just a Boolean that says active or inactive. And so when we create a new entity, all we do is we just loop through the entire entity pool and then find the first inactive one. And then we just slot the entity in there. That's the same way that all of our components work, right? Is that we just allocate a maximum amount, and then when something is destroyed, then we just go through all of our components and then find a new slot, and then just give the pointer to that slot to the entity. Does the entity construct contain all the components? It contains pointers to the components. That's the point of components. Of an entity component system is that you don't actually have the components on the entity struct, but rather pointers to the components. The reason being is that you can loop through all of the components without having to loop through all of the entities that have those components. Because of CPU cache misses and stuff like that is, for example, when you're doing like physics stuff, if you need a for loop through all of the physics components or whatever, then you don't have to loop through all of the entities, you know. So yeah, at least that's as far as I understand it, right? So yeah, basically there are just buffers of components that are allocated entirely separately from the entities themselves, and all we do is give pointers to the components. Okay. So this may seem verbose and annoying what I'm doing here, but I'm just gonna do this and copy this over. So hold on. Entity if GL not equal. And we do this, else set the component flag to 0, and we just pass the U model. Okay, so we don't need that. We don't need any of that. We can just get rid of all that. This will be a separate function. So this will be and this will just live in here. And this is what a regular entity will get, is just the regular model and a 0 initialized U component flag. But otherwise we want to do all of this. For the stenciled ones. Okay, so obviously we're going to have two different functions that do this. So this is going to be the one on the left. So this is going to be this, and then this one's going to be on the right. So let me copy this all down and stop being dumb. Okay. Now, left and right don't actually mean anything here in terms of real space. It's just, this is the one that I do minus, and that's the one that I do plus. It's not actually left or right. It's just kind of basically what I have to do is I have to make a new model matrix for the outline. That's how it works. All right, I didn't change the signature here. Okay. We have to do all of this here to get the TRS. And for now, we can just zero initialize the component flag because we don't really know if we have an NPC component on each entity. Okay. Does this just work, or do I have to do something else that I'm not remembering? Add bind shader program. I hate this song. Sorry, that was a bit aggressive. I don't like this song. That's how much I don't like it. Okay, so we can get rid of this from being in here now. Hopefully. Okay. I'm just going to comment it out for now. And what we're going to do is if G, which is group, callback dot shader bind function, then we're gonna call callback.shader bind function with the group and whichever instance data. Yes. And if I did everything right, stencil left, stencil right, we have to also slot these functions in here. Shader stencil left and shader stencil right. I don't know why this is giving me an error. Let me see. Oh. I messed this up in here. Oh, no, I didn't mess this up in here. I messed this up over here. These are just void. I don't know why I put void pointer. Okay. This should just work. Hold on. Maybe it doesn't work. Hold on. I may have not actually put it in the group itself. Yeah, I didn't. Oh no, I did. Stencil left and stencil right. Okay. Render callback has no member named shader bind function. What are we smoking? It does. It definitely does. Yeah, I feel like I gotta change this playlist around. Really get some fresh stuff going on. Okay, we have a seg fault happening. And bind shader program. I am guessing. Guessing that because resolve. Yeah, we didn't set it to null. For all the groups that don't have a render callback. Yeah, I'm sorry if anybody here, I haven't responded to comments on my videos yet while I was away. So that's something that I'm going to do tonight. I know that I had a few that I didn't respond to, and I feel bad about that. Okay, so some things are broken. Okay. Huh. Okay. What? What? Okay, so there's a few things that are wrong here. First of all, there's only one tree. Okay. I know what's happening. I know what's happening. I know what's happening. What we need to do is we need to, I need to put the generic one as well. That's what I forgot to do. So I only am doing the stencil ones. And I made the function for shader assign entity, but I didn't actually put it in the definitions. So okay. So this is gonna be for every single entity. So that isn't the stencil. So obviously this is going to happen for everything. I'm wondering why this didn't break more things, to be honest, because all of this was getting executed if our instance data entity ID wasn't -1, which is maybe that's because geometry has a dummy instance. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't have a dummy instance at all. think that's what I called it, right? Because, believe it or not, geometry is an entity as well. Believe it or not. Okay, this should be all of them. Okay, let me test this out now. Not going to be a long stream today. I have an appointment in a few hours, so I have to keep track of the time, actually. Gonna leave a bit before that because I need to get ready for it. Okay, so this fixed it. And yeah, so this is working as it's supposed to. We obviously have the stencil on the right and the stencil on the left. Basically, there's one that we shift down and to the left, and then one in 3D space, right? Cool. Neato. Neato. Okay. There you go. So, why are these two different lengths? Does this one look like it has more stuff than this one? ID val function should run over. My eyes are deceiving me. It doesn't have more stuff. Strange. Okay, my eyes are incorrect. Okay. So, that's all of that cleaned up. Now that's abstracted away. So that now if we have, now if we have different stuff that we need to put in for different materials, then we can have a different function that does it. And I'm just going to get rid of this then. Okay, so if we have a callback that we need to bind some uniforms, then that's how we do it. Per render group. And per entity instance. Okay. On the topic of entity instances, we have to do what was the title of the stream, which is the game save and load and map save and load and all of that stuff. So we have to design that. Yeah. So I'm thinking we do this. There are two different things, right? Yay, serialization. Yay. Very fun. Yeah, yay. But yeah, there are two different things. There's two different things that are separate, right? There's game data and then there's world data. And so world data is like map data. So for example, if you have a map that you edited and that you want to save, that data is going to be different than, for example, if you save your game and then load in that saved game, right? When you load in a saved game, that function that loads that saved game is going to load that map with game data that changes that map, right? Or maybe not. Maybe not, actually. Maybe you just want to save things as it is. And not really worry about that. And therefore your game save and load are the same thing. Ultimately, what I am kind of concerned about, though, is that, for example, when you save a map, you aren't saving game data. So you aren't saving, like, for example, if you have, like, certain choices that the player has made or, you know, blah, 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 blah. You don't actually have that data to save, right? So you're saving a map. You're not actually saving. I'm wondering if that just is a player component, though. That just has those flags in memory, and then we just serialize that. Yeah, I think that might be what you do. I think that's what you do. I think the simplest way of serializing and loading in is literally looping through all of the entities and then saving per entity. Because right now our geometry is an entity and everything that is physical in the world is an entity. And so that makes sense to me. Is just go through all of the entities and then serialize them one by one. And then when we load the game, just spawn in those entities. Yeah. What I was thinking to design this, right, like when I was first kind of going through it, right? What I was going to have was a structure that gets saved that has a matrix for transformation. No. Per asset with, and what it has inside of it is instant structures that store this, right? So when you save your map, you're saving assets which have an array inside of them that store the transformation matrices and the component data. And then when you load, this is easy, obviously, because you have an asset location up here. And so when you load, you follow asset path and then spawn instances for all of these structures inside of here. Will I have any multi-threading? I don't really know how the whole multi-threading inside of game engines work. I don't have enough expertise in it to really implement it. I've looked at some videos about multi-threading in game engines, and from what I can understand, its uses are in processing certain component steps, right, during runtime. So, for example, like matrix transforms for all of your animations, all of your physics simulation steps, and things like that. I just don't think that it's necessary for what I want to make to implement it. And it would add so much complexity, I think, that it may just not be worth it to do it. It also may end up being less performant than if I didn't have multi-threading. Reason why is my experience with multi-threading is that you have to make everything thread safe, and that inherently creates overhead with, for example, locking and unlocking mutexes and all this sort of thing. It makes things slower to make them faster, which if it already isn't necessary, then I would like to avoid it completely. And yeah, the research I've done it is that multi-threading in terms of game engines actually isn't that important, but I'm sure there are engines that do it though, for sure. But yeah, that's why I'm kind of like I'm not like a multi-threading like fan in general. But I do think that it's probably because I don't really know how to design good multi-threaded systems. I think that it's really easy to design it wrong, and I've probably gone about it wrong in the past. To be honest, the literature on it is just very confusing on how to design good multi-threaded systems, and making things thread safe and all of this, It's something where I always end up like unlocking and locking mutexes like a billion times per frame, and that just makes everything super slow, obviously. So, yeah. So, yeah, so this is what I was thinking, was that per asset we store like an asset data thing that gets serialized, which has its location, it stores all of the instance data per instance, which is the matrix, the component data, and just entity data in general. Then on load, we follow the path for that asset, and then we spawn instances based on the instance data. That's what I was going to do. That way, this is the fastest way to do it, right? In terms of loading, because then you just load the asset once, and then the instances, and then just spawn the instances for that asset, right? However, it's not exactly, it sounds very simple to do this, but it's not exactly the simplest thing to do, because we don't actually have the data in this form. All we start with is a list of entities in no specific order. And they point to their assets. However, we have to loop through them in a creative way to do it efficiently, right? Because when you're serializing something like this, you want to just serialize all of the instances for that asset once instead of just like here and there, because when you load it in, you just want to follow the asset path and load it once. Okay. So how do I do that? Good question. How do I do that? We could just load through, we could just loop through all of the assets themselves that we have loaded and serialize them like that. We just loop through and then per asset look for entities that have that asset, right? But what about assets that don't have an entity? That we could just ignore them, I guess. We could just ignore them. It's an inefficient way to loop for sure. Because you'd be looping through the pool of entities per asset that you have loaded in, which is inefficient for sure. But the alternative is that you loop through it once and then queue sort asset IDs. And then just loop through that list once. Trying to think here. Yeah, that's probably the most efficient way to do it, right? Is to just queue sort based on asset ID and then just loop through that buffer because that's already sorted. Yeah. We just would have to queue sort, and I just the reason why I'm pausing here on this is because it's going to be kind of annoying to set up, I think. I may have to mem copy it before I queue sort it. Because I don't want to change the indexes of the entities themselves. Just in case I'm breaking something somewhere that references those indices, right? So I think those are the two options. We either loop through every asset and look for the entities that have that asset ID, which is like a nested loop, or we just queue sort and loop through it once. But the queue sort version is going to require a mem copy. Okay. And obviously not just a mem copy, but well, actually, yeah, maybe it is just a mem copy because all of the pointers on an entity are pointing to components that are still valid. The addresses, obviously. So let me go to the entity struct and see what the problem would be if we mem copy all of our entities. What can we not copy? this... I think that we can do all of it. I just have to remember how to how to queue sort properly. Okay. And we're gonna queue sort by what is it? Instance ID? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's how the save and load is going to work in terms of physical space. Is that we're just going to queue sort the entities and then loop through them, and then every time we get a different asset ID, just save a different asset location, and then a structure that has all of this, right? To binary. And then when we load, we're going to loop through that, obviously, and spawn in those entities. Then what else did I have to save back when I was doing this? God, I don't remember any of this. This is it, right? Map save. Where's the load? Map save? Load light map, save light map. Where's the... Oh, load map. Still doing all this chunking thing with the sizes. Which we aren't going to do this anymore with all this collision geometry, blah blah blah. This is not happening. None of this is happening. We're just going to load in entities, obviously. But we have this map data that still is getting loaded and saved, which is our logical width, our ambient color, sky text ID. Yeah, all of this is whatever. And we just malloc the map width and height. Yeah, that's fine. And then we read map cell for all of the cells for the cell data, And what are we reading in that it has that we need to have now? I don't think that we need... anything. Wall normal, faces solid. Okay. All of this stuff is no longer in use. None of it is being used anymore. All of this stuff was kind of before we had kind of arbitrary model geometry. Hello, I want to make my own game in OpenGL with C++. How do I learn it? I'm watching a lot of tutorials, but I don't really understand what I'm doing. What's the best path to take while learning OpenGL? I think using learnopengl.com is probably the best path. There's a lot of examples and example code there with... and what it basically does is it has like different topics like shading and, you know, whatever. And you can just basically copy the code and it teaches you what it does. So that's really good. Otherwise, in my videos, I give a lot of resources. I would say, like, for modern OpenGL, OGL dev is a really good resource. Yeah, there's a lot of different resources, you know, depending on which version you're using for OpenGL, because obviously 4.6 is a lot different than 3.30 or 3.3, right? So it depends on that. But yeah, and also join our Discord if you have any questions. I think everybody in there probably can help answer any questions, including me. Oh yeah, and I meant to fix that. Apparently the Discord link isn't working, so let me fix that. Maybe I can't fix that right now. Yeah, I might not be able to fix that right now because... maybe I can. Hold on, sorry. I totally forgot about that this Discord link isn't working. The last time I streamed, somebody was like, oh, it doesn't work. I was like, really? I put it to never expire. Yeah, but I am going to have to do this, and I'm hoping that I don't leak anything that I'm not supposed to leak here. This is the exact same link that was already here. It's the exact same link. Okay, well... maybe it's possible that the Nightbot command is incorrect. Sorry. Maybe let me check that. Yeah, the Nightbot command is different. So I'll change the Nightbot command to have the correct link. So hopefully that's what that was about. Okay. Okay. So all this valid triangle, this was all when we were still doing like map editing that was per triangle. Now that isn't going to be able to happen since we are doing all this GLTF stuff that's animation and model matrix and blah blah blah. What we will have to build is something that, if we want to do per triangle, per vertex geometry changing in map editor mode, then what I'm going to have to build is a GLTF exporter, which takes in your asset that you've now edited, and then exports it to a certain file format that you can then reload in again with those changes. And that's going to have to be the same exact convention as, GLTF or .object, because you want it to be in the same file format that Blender uses, because let's say you change your map around and then you want to open it in Blender or whatever, we can't just import it one way and then it gets stuck in the engine. It has to export too. And making a GLTF importer was hard enough. So thanks. My goal is to make a game like Counter-Strike 1.6 of the gold SRC engine look style. I have a bit of both C and C++ on my Windows. Should I switch to C or stick to C++? I love Counter-Strike 2. In fact, my engine basically copies the source engine movement code, because I spent most of my time as a teenager bunny hopping in CSS. About switching to C, I don't know. It depends. Like, I don't really know C++, so that's why I did it in C. It's because I like C, and I could never get my head around C++, to be honest. But I do think that every developer job for game engine development, for game programming, is in C++. So I'm not going to say, I'm not a hiring manager, so I don't know if I was to look at somebody that had only written, projects in C, if I would, hire them regardless, if but there is that component that I think learning C++ is more transferable to projects that are going to involve other people, because most projects that involve other people are done in C++ nowadays. There isn't really any game engine or game that's being programmed in C. So that's what I'd say, is that if you were to make a personal thing, then there are other skills that you're going to have to learn if you want to turn it into a career, I guess. Yeah, so that's just like a personal kind of thing with me, right? Is that, like, if I was to ever, like, be like, hey, I made a game engine, can I work at your studio? It's like, I'd have to learn good C++, which, modern C++ is vastly different in how you deal with pointers and memory than C, right? So I would probably embarrass myself a lot. But yeah. Now, I'm not saying, like, from what I've heard is that, like, it doesn't really matter what language, because I think apparently it's about, like, the quality of the code itself, and I think every language is kind of transferable to every other language. So I'm not really going to sit here and say, if you do your engine in C, then everybody's going to look at it and be like, oh, well, we can't hire him because we only hire people that know C++. But yeah. If I were to do it over again, I would stick to C anyway, just because I like C more. Okay. Okay. So we are going to change these functions. Yeah, these functions are gonna look totally different, but I'm just gonna comment out this old one and then copy it down and then just work on it from scratch pretty much. But yeah. Okay, so this is the new map save binary. All of that can stay. All of the per map cell stuff can save, and none of this valid try stuff is gonna be a thing. Oh, we already were f-writing the assets. I forgot that I did this. This isn't actually being used, but if you do pick C++, remember that just because a feature exists doesn't mean you should use it. Yeah, that's the thing with C++ is that there's kind of use cases for everything. And it's about knowing, I guess, all of the features and knowing when to use which feature. That I never really understood. I think it's way easier to get good at C than it is C++ because in C there's only one way to do everything pretty much, you know. If we're just talking about like standard library, there's just kind of one way to do things. And I like that. I dislike kind of like sitting here and like trying to figure out, you know. Okay. So these GLTF instances is actually just the assets. That's what we called them. And now the refactor for that is going to take a while if we want to change the name, so we're just leaving it. So we just write the asset name. But instead of this, what we actually want to do is we want to mem copy. We need to make a entity pointer I don't really know what I'm doing here. Sun map. Okay. That's how we do it, I think. And then we just queue sort it. And then we have to have a compare function. And I don't remember how to do that, but we have to do that. So is it just entity count? Every time I do this, it's so confusing. And then we're comparing based on we use a function signature here to do it. I'm trying to remember where else I queue sort. I think I do it for. Yeah. It's this. I just copy this every time I make another sort thing. So that I copied it from somewhere at some point, and now I just copy it every time I need a queue sort now. So it returns an int, apparently. That's what it is, and it's const void pointer with two of the things, and then you just use the it's gonna compare asset ID. Hey, what's up, Zwixo? How are you doing? These are going to be entity pointers, and we are comparing the instance ID of both of those, and then this should be in ascending order, right? Diff is a minus that, so if it's negative, then that would be the first is less than the second, and so return greater than 0, 0 minus less than 0, which would return -1. Cool. Okay, so -1. That means that it goes before, I think, right? So compare asset ID for it's just a function signature, I think, right? Okay, hopefully that's how that works. I think that's how that works. Yeah. Okay, so once those are queue sorted, we also have to remember to so we're gonna loop through them. Okay, so we're gonna have a int current asset ID, and then always compare against it. So if our current asset ID doesn't equal the entity's let's just get the, for simplicity, entity pointer and equals entities indexed by I. And I always forget to do this. And instance ID. If we have a new asset ID, then we need to write the asset address. So that's going to be this. So every time we find a new asset, then we do that, which it is going to look it up based on, well, we can just do current asset ID equals ent instance ID, and then just look it up based on the current asset ID, and then we will write the name. How many years of experience do I have? In C, about a year, maybe more by now, but in coding, I guess, since I was 16, off and on. So in terms of like years since I started programming, about 8, but in terms of actually coding and not being a jackass, probably like 3. Okay. Okay. So we write the asset name. And then we write all the entity instance data. The issue is that when we're loading in, we need to know the size. We need to know how many entities. So when we find a new asset ID, that means we have to count. That's really nice. Good job. Thanks. We have to actually count. So for, let's just say int e equals the current I and e less than entity count, we're just going to loop through until we have a new asset ID. So if current asset ID doesn't equal entities e dot instance ID, then we want to say we can have current entity count, okay? And so if our current asset ID, if we find a new one, then we want to set the entity count to the difference between E and I. So then current entity count will equal E minus I, right? To find the difference. Maybe that's E minus I minus 1. Hold on, let me think. Let me think. So if we're starting from 0 and we have 8 entities, and that the 9th one has a different instance ID, then we're going to count up to 9, and then it's going to be 9 minus 0. And so then you're going to end with 9, but you really want 8, so it is minus 1. At the end, from what I understand it as, but hold on, let me think about this. So if we have 0, if we're at entity 0, and then at entity 1 we have a different ID, right? So we're gonna loop up to that, and then So it's going to be 1 minus 0 is 1, and then we're going to get 0 out of here. So no, that's wrong. No, it is e minus I. Yeah. Because if you're starting from 0 and counting to 9, then you do have 9 because you started from 0 anyway. Yeah. Okay. I was just being dumb. Okay. We want a break here. I always get nervous about writing these breaks because once I wrote a break like this, which was inside an if inside of a loop, and then it did not break properly. Do I know Tokyo Spliff? Yeah, I know of him. Don't know him personally, but yeah. Pretty cool guy. His stuff is definitely above my pay grade with his like lighting and stuff and so yeah, so then we want to write the amount of entities that we are counting to, right? So we're going to write I am back. Hey, Isabel. I am back. Hi, back. I'm back. Good to see you. I haven't really checked the Discord, to be honest. I know that there's also a few YouTube comments that I haven't responded to, too. Sorry about that, but yeah, I just haven't been doing stuff recently, so it had to be time to do stuff today. So we're gonna write the count, the amount of entities that we're writing, and then we're gonna continue writing the entities. Right. So this is, if we find a new asset, then we write the name, we write the amount of entities, and then we just write, and then we do the writing. Cool. After giving it some thought, I should just do switch to C. I have to be really good at C for college and my future job, so learning it now is ideal. Is setting GLAD and GLW the same in C? I'm not really sure. On the setup side, I think it should be the same. I'm not really sure about GLFW since I use SDL. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same as, include system. So it should be, just doing the same linking thing. Obviously, you have to use GCC, or apparently you can use G++ for it. But I've always run into issues with the whole cross-compiling thing. I don't know how people do it, but I know that people compile C and G++, but I've always gotten errors. But maybe there's some way of doing it. But yeah. Okay, so this is where we're gonna write all of the per entity data. Pain. That's painful. Because there's a lot of stuff on our entity struct that isn't actually gonna end up being used. So there's a lot of stuff here that isn't gonna end up being used, but we probably should just like serialize it because it'll probably break things if we don't. Even though obviously every entity doesn't need HP, and like, you know, this stuff can be in components. This doesn't need to be on it. And I completely understand that, but I just want to keep things simple for now. Okay. Is the MSVC compiler in Visual Studio good enough? It does not have the latest C stuff like C23, only partial integration of new features. I'm not sure. I haven't really used Visual Studio in years. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Not really sure. But I know a lot of people that use it for C, and it's fine, I guess, you know. It's probably worth it to use Visual Studio because, you know, it's good to get in the habit of using like a debugger, I think. Okay, so this is kind of painful. There's a lot of things here that I don't need to serialize, obviously, like this stuff. This should also kind of be on component. It should be like on a navigation component, I think. All of this, the forward vector and the velocity and etc. What I was kind of thinking of was following the entity to its definition, since we have entity definition as a thing, right? Entity definition is how, when we load in our entities, this is the data that we refer to. However, this doesn't actually have the component data, obviously. However, I could get the entity definition and then see, oh, we have an NPC component. We need to like write that. Yeah. Not sure. Not sure what the best way to go about it is, because obviously all of this stuff isn't being used. Size, brightness, this stuff. It's kind of all. The material ID, I think, is real, though. Maybe. So we would be serializing this behavior string. This stuff would get resolved. This is the asset ID. Node and skin ID are actually important because that's within the asset. This we don't. All of this, no. This we do. It's funny because we spent that time making that hitbox editor, you know? Spent like 2 or 3 streams working on the whole hitbox register thing, and hitboxes registering hits and stuff, and honestly, I don't even think it's going to be used. So maybe we don't for now. And then the TRS, and then store these separately. Yeah. How long does it take to discover all the basics in C? Not long at all. That's why I like C. It's very simple. And good thing about C, I was mentioning it before, is that there's kind of one way to do everything. There's just one way, you know? Or at most 2 or 3 ways, you know? You're not like having to think, oh, which feature am I going to use to do this, you know, or whatever, you know? It's all like kind of it also makes your code really understandable because of that, I think. Like, I'm never looking at my code and being like, oh, I have no clue what this does. Because I wrote it a long time ago. It's all quite easy to read, I think. Unless you're reading code from people that like use variables that are like int lz equals xz minus lyz plus size of tst. And in that case, it's not readable. There are a lot of those fellows out in the world, though. Average Math says physics programming book. Yeah, I mean, your code looks like that. So, name everything with single letters. Yeah, I do sometimes. Like, obviously here, but E is entity. I always use. It's my default. And like when I do render groups, I refer to it as G. But I try not to do that. Like the most I'll do is like int now. You know? Oh, yeah, they do it, but always and for very complex algorithms. Yeah, I know. I'm well aware it's super confusing. Like how you even write code like that, I don't understand. Like I don't understand why you don't just like call it what it is instead of like. But they understand all of that. They understand all of that, like you know, delta, omega, fucking, you know, they know what all of it means all the time. So I guess it makes sense to them, but for someone like me, every time I read that shit, it just confuses the hell out of me. Like, a good example is, like, if you go to the Wikipedia page for, anything, for example, I'm gonna bring up where I know it's weird is, just an example that I know is weird is the Fong Wikipedia page. It's like, well, no, this actually looks fine. Oh yeah, this. It gives you this. Like this is this. For the Fong. Like what the fuck is that? Like what the fuck are we talking about, man? Like that's not English, dude. Like what? What? Like what are we talking about, man? That's like... And they explain what the variables are. But I've also been on Wikipedia pages where they don't explain what the variables are. And it's just like a bunch of letters. And yeah, yeah. That's how things are in the math world. I just never got it. That's why I was always confused in calculus, dude. It's like all the LYs and the DZs and the, you know. Yeah, I never, that's where I fell off in math, was I just never got the whole calculus thing. Because, man, calculus requires such a good foundation in algebra that I guess I never had. Like, I remember in my calculus class, I just could never understand, like, the way my professor would do the proofs, you know? Like, I remember I would be like stuck on it, right? I would just like be like, I don't know like where to go, like how do I, you know? And she would just be like, oh, because this is, you know, because you can obviously with this fraction and, you know, if you take the reciprocal of this and this and this, then it balances out fine. And I'm like, you know, it's like literally like wizardry. She would be like, oh, well, this -1 is that -2, so therefore, you know, and like, it's just like, are you just making this shit up? But yeah. Anyway, back to what I was doing. We were f-writing all of this entity data into the thing. This is going to be the ent. We're gonna do it in order with only the stuff that we need to that isn't deprecated. So that's going to be the leash radius, the behavior, and node ID, instance ID. I mean skin ID, that's what I meant. And walk speed we can do as well. The whole hitbox thing we're gonna skip for now. We can serialize both the TRS and the position, rotation, and scale just to be absolutely sure that we're doing all of this correctly. So yeah, I've got to make another video, I think. I haven't really made a video in a long time. Very, very long time, actually. I was looking at the, how long it's been, and it's been a long, long time, like months. So I don't know what the video is going to be about. I have to kind of write kind of a list of all the things that I've done since then. And kind of try and make it into some form that's digestible, I guess, to all the problems that I solved and stuff. But yeah, I know that if I made short videos, they would probably do a lot better in terms of like viewership, but I just don't know how I would do it. It's hard. It's hard for me to make short stuff without it seeming kind of shallow, At least to me, I'm not sure what that cooldown and duration is. Also, obviously, if ent free slot, then continue, because if an entity, you also want to actually put this here when we're looping through here. Well, no. Yeah, so basically what this is if an entity is not real, then we aren't gonna save it, obviously. If it needs to be, if it's basically just an empty piece of memory. The cooldown and duration, I don't know what that is. Maybe there's something was like hard coded with that. I feel like that shouldn't be a thing, but yeah, I don't know, because this is down here with all the new stuff, so I don't know why that isn't in my memory bank in my mind. But okay, so and then if ent create NPC component, then we go ent NPC component and then serialize all of that. And then we're going to do that for every component. Okay. This nodes and these skins, by the way, are copied data from the asset data, so it isn't important. Okay, so let's find everything that's on that. Right. So this was all of our kind of like templated stuff that you would have for game, is like items, spells, whatever. Yeah. I wonder why this is an item pointer. Equipped items. Huh. Does that... I wonder if that is kind of like a component that these items. I think that's why I have it like this item pointer, an array of pointers, is because these are a global list actually, and these are just references to those items. I think I designed that for a reason that way. Equipped items, right. When you have them equipped, they're pointers. Righto. Okay, so we would have to serialize that in a strange way. Okay, so let's do this. So once again, I'm gonna skip this song because I hate it. Dislike it, I mean. Okay. I guess since we're doing like a game save, you kind of do... Actually, yeah, you kind of do want to save all of these things that are like happening, I guess, in real time, you know? So this, like, in combat, all of these also need to get saved as well, including the stuff that we skipped on the entity. So that's gonna have to happen. Yeah, a lot of boring stuff today, huh? Okay, so now we have to go through all of the items and stuff like that. So I is for items, but we already used it, so we're gonna use T. We need to get the item. Yeah, this is pretty much like a... It feels like a Russian nesting doll with all of these like layers that we're like going through. It's like... It's like, oh, we need to serialize the entities. And the entities have an NPC component. And then the NPC component has items. Yeah. So, kind of a bummer. Sorry. Mike was kind of bothering me. This UI element pointer info is kind of interesting. I don't think that we need to serialize this because this is assigned somewhere else. Yeah. Hello there, Shiloh. Shiloh. How are you? Sprite and texture ID. Those do need to get saved. If that's like a part of the definition. Actually, hold on. Are these items defined somewhere, or are these, do I just hard code them? For now, I think I just hard coded the sprite and texture IDs, so I'm just gonna match that here and then say that we are just going to put them here. But what we're probably gonna do in the future is just have like a registry of these things and then just like follow a pointer to that reference with all the data for it, instead of just like copying it per item, which is like the correct way to do things. Okay, so this is the item stuff. Okay, so otherwise we have to also we're gonna do item count, item capacity. I'm not really sure why item capacity works since it's initialized to max items. I think that there is a reason for that though. Some possible gameplay ramifications of like maybe inventory space or something. I think we loop through item capacity at some point. And then selection callback for the item selection thing. It's basically what item we have currently selected. That's how we find that, is that we follow this callback function to find where we have that data. So pointer is something that we get the selected item from. And then I have this commented out. Selected get function and selected bind function. Yeah, but where do I even have these selection callbacks? Like, where's the name of the callback itself? Selection callback, where do I use this? Hold on. This would be actually in UI, in it UI, in this kind of like hard-coded setup thing that we have here for testing. I hard code the item, the data, right? And then get attack from registry. This is what I was thinking. Get attack from registry. It goes through global's attacks, initialize attack registry. Okay, but I don't actually use. I don't actually set up those selection callback things. So really we don't even use that yet. I don't think that we implemented it. Right now I think how do I have attack ID as a string instead of an enum? Um, so there's this whole like string enum thing. I hear like so many people say to me like, "Oh, enums are so much safer. There's so much, you know." Um, yeah, but um, they're compiled, and um, a game engine is not compiled. You know what I mean? So let's say you want to have an attack that has a different name. You would have to change the source code of the engine, you know, um, as an enum, right? You'd have to like literally go in and then recompile every time you want to add an attack. In terms of an engine, like you want a user to be able to make items, attacks, whatever, with whatever name, right? So you kind of have to work with strings so that you're not forcing the user to recompile, right? So that's why it's all strings. But yeah, in terms of like if you want to make an application that is just compiled and that just like does what it, you know, I do use enums for stuff that is like set in stone, right? Like points on a triangle, right? Or like A, B, and C. And things like that. I also use enums for different types of UI elements and different states of UI elements. Like if something is pressed, if something is hovered, that's all the stuff that I use enums for, because there's a finite amount of states that one could conceive of it being used for. But for things like, you know, that are component data, it definitely has to be strings. And the strings, obviously, we match on in a definition kind of registry where we get information for it, right? For example here, right? It gets an attack from registry, it, like this name of swing, right? And we have this like hard-coded kind of like setup here, initialize attack registry, that literally just like puts in the information data for this attack, and the stats or whatever. And then when we just search, we search for the string. And you might think like, oh, well, if it was an enum, then it would be faster, right? Because you wouldn't have to string compare against everything in a registry on load time. And that's true, but the performance, as far as I understand, is like negligible, like really negligible for comparing strings. Even though you'd think that it wouldn't be. And yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to make like, I kind of wish that there was, right? There was a way to like make it so that during runtime you could add or, you know, change the elements of an enum, but you can't, because that's, you know, that would be literally changing the source code, right? So, but yeah, it is something that I hear in like, you know, I've seen like YouTube videos where people are like, you know, top 10 coding practices, use enums instead of strings. And, you know, because obviously, you know, their reason is because this swing is different from this swing, you know? I don't know, it's never been a problem for me, personally that I've run into a lot of bugs with other things, but not really that. But yeah, everything in an engine kind of has to be done in strings under the hood, pretty much. Okay. Gosh, stop pasting. I'm trying to press GP, and it's, oh, that's why. It's because it's I had caps lock on. Okay, get back on track. So, we have our items. We have these equipped items that let's just write a to-do for that. Oh god, what time is it? I have to keep track of the time. Hold on. It's 3 hours since I started. Oh yeah, I gotta go soon. Probably in the next like 30 minutes. 30-40 minutes I have to leave. My appointment is at 4 and I need to get ready. Okay. So we're not going to do the equip stuff yet because I need to figure out if I'm going to serialize like indexes into these items or what. I assume that that's how I'm going to do it, but yeah, so we are going to do the same. This is like the same thing for items, spells, whatever. The way you're going to have this completely abstracted away, by the way, is that you would have if you wanted to have this like completely user defined in terms of like their game or whatever, and you didn't want to hard code items, spells, attacks, you would end up having like a struct that is just a generic component, right? And then they would be able to define what is an item, what is a spell, what do those need? And so yeah, that's how you would be able to define those without having to have them on compile time, But that's kind of a pain to implement, so right now I just kind of like hard-coded stuff. But once again, old me would have spent so much time, making that completely generic and like elegant, like wait a second, does spell, I don't have anything in spells, do I? Yeah, I just have ID. Yeah. Yeah, so what you would end up with is just a you'd be like, instead of going individually through items, spells, what you would have is you would just have a for loop that just goes through int I equals 0, I less than npc generic component count, right? And then just loop through all the generic components, and then per them, right? They're, you know, they might have like a callback function that does that, right? But I'm lazy for now. Also, I'm kind of becoming of the opinion that it's like the more complicated you make something, you design something in the beginning, then the worse designed it is. Like, if you design something like basic first, then you know what it requires when you need to abstract it away. Like, if I just spent all my time like making like a generic component, etc., then I wouldn't really know how to implement it, and I would probably have to like go back anyway and fix it, because I kind of lack the insight that I'm going to get by just doing it simply first, you know? Okay. Okay. So that's that. Hey, what's up, Cal? What's up? What is up? What is up? What is up? What is up? So these attacks already have this attack definition thing. For now, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay. So I think that that's everything apparently inside of NPC component, other than the base stats and the geared stats, which I guess are important. That's going to be a lot of F writing. That's a lot, to be honest. Right? That is a lot. That is a lot indeed. It's basically just a bunch of floats, right? So you end up with with all of these. You want to do all of these. They're all floats, right? Yeah. So we're just going to do them in order. That's probably like a really easy way to do it. Anyway, what you want eventually is, you want probably when you have a component, what you probably want is like this you know, this would be like a generic component, and then you probably go like generic component serialize function, and then that is what does all of this, right? And that's what's compiled. But that's complicated to do once again, so we're not doing that yet. Luckily, this is kind of not that painful to do. It's pretty fast. We just want to do it this way so that we can figure out if everything is working before we complicate things. It needs to be complicated. Okay, and then it's bleed strength and laceration chance. This is all just like random stuff. I kind of did. I did like I did some sketching out of all of the different things that are gonna be in the game, and this was kind of like some of them in terms of like mechanics, I guess. The reason why we have base stats and geared stats as different things is because for efficiency, when you remove an item or get a debuff or whatever, you want to just like have these separately, right? So that you know what you're using for calculations. Okay. Alrighty. Right, we wanted to go back to the entity and put some stuff in here that we skipped out on before. So much of this isn't being used though, which, you know, but yeah, so this stuff is gonna have to be serialized though. All of the navigation stuff, because you want to save the entire state of the game, right? So when you save your game, you want entities to, you know, obviously keep their navigation pathing and all of that. Like that needs to be saved. So yeah, I don't know if I can just write a to do that though. Like I don't have to do that right now, because that might send us down a whole other rabbit hole. All okay, so that's seems like that's pretty much it. Yeah, the question is, when I load in, when we load in all of those entities and we spawn all of them in, the issue is that we want to spawn them in the same order that they were previously, just in case we have any index references to entities that need to be preserved. And so we save them in a queue sorted way per asset, but we want to spawn them in a different order. Or rather, we want to fill in different parts of the array. And so what we want to do is we also want to fwrite the entire entity count. to the file, right? So, right. Okay, so we write the entity count to the file. And so when we load in entities, what we do is we well, we just allocate to the max anyway, but I mean, yeah, we just allocate to the max anyway. And what we do is we fwrite inside of here, we fwrite ent id, which is the index, the original index of the entity. Index in global arena. I said it there. And so when I load it in, I know which entity we are filling in, right? To grab. So, yeah. It's almost time. I think it's time to open this up in a split and do the load. Map load binary. Yeah, I never did this. So there is no geometry anymore. This can get commented out. And now it's just asset. So it's this. All of this. Reason why I'm copying this is because fwrite is, you know, pretty much just fread, right? It's the same kind of syntax. But obviously I'm going to have to change some things. Okay. So we are going to we have this whole so you'd end up going fread like that. Then you want to do the opposite, right? So you want to go map, wait, hold on, map, yeah, map entities dot counter. Whoops. Right, you want to make it yeah, why didn't I just, I'm just stupid. That's why. Why didn't I just, yeah, I'm just stupid, that's why. So that's the amount of entities, and then we want to allocate to the max, but for now I think let's just go just set the capacity to that counter, because we have error handling for all of that stuff anyway. Okay. Now, we obviously could run into a big crashing error here, because if these bytes get misaligned and we read in, you know, we're not going to worry about that now. We're not going to worry about that now. That we could like allocate like a million bazillion entities and crash. Wouldn't be the first time that that's happened, but okay. So don't need a mem copy, don't need a queue sort, don't need that. Okay. So okay, this is the first thing we're gonna change here. Okay, so we're always going to start off with an asset, right? And then we're going to have the entities. And then we're going to start off with an asset and then have its entities. Okay, so you don't really have the amount of unique entities though before this, and so what we'd have to end up doing is looping twice. We'd have to loop through all of our entities, find all of the unique assets, and then store a count of them, and then write that here, so that here we know, okay, we need to loop through this many assets with this many entities inside of those assets. But I don't want to do that because that would be inefficient, even though the code would look a lot simpler. What we're gonna do instead is I think what we do is we f-read the very first asset and the very first entity. Oh god. No, yeah, you need the counts beforehand. You do. Actually, no, because we have the entity count. We have the entity count here. I think what you have to do is you have to while loop it instead of a for loop, which I shy away from while loops, but yeah, I think that we have to. Uh, this is stupid. You don't. Okay, here's what you do need to do though. Is you load in the very first asset. There will always be an asset first, right? So you're gonna read that in. Right, you're gonna read this in, the name and the count, okay? And then you are just gonna loop through all of them. And then once that count has expired, then you know there's the next asset. Okay, because they're all in the same order. So this is going to be the name is the path. So does this work? Can I do this? Hold on, don't I need the, how was I doing this before? Don't I need the, I need the size of the name. I need to write that too. I need to write that too. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's also going to be in here. So okay. I'll write a note here just so that I remind myself, since this isn't exactly clear. Okay. Okay, so this isn't gonna matter. In fact, we can go ent free slot. It's false. This isn't going to index by I though. What we just said is the first thing that we write is the ID. And so that's the first thing we're gonna fread as well. Fread into and then we'll use that to get which entity we are loading in. Thing is though, we want to do this after the asset checking. However, we're only going to do this if our what we're gonna do is if our current entity index is equal to the current entity count, then we know we need to add a new load in the next asset. Okay. And I don't think that we want to preserve instance IDs. I think that that's a bit strange to preserve the instance IDs. We probably just want to call load asset basically, right? We can go load gltf emit tries is the regular one on the path. Okay, it's 228. Okay. That takes in a bunch of stuff that we probably don't even have in here, right? We have that. That. I don't think that we have this. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about all of this. We're just gonna comment that out for now, but yeah. So we obviously want to do, this is what we're gonna do for each asset. And then and then we're gonna load in the asset, obviously. And then we want to set current entity count or current entity index equal to 0 since we're starting over. And then when we get to the end, we want to increment the index, right? And hopefully that will work. So when the index equals the count, then we know to, yeah. Yeah, hopefully that works. So if you have an index for, or a count, for example, of 1, you have one instance of an entity, then you just increment it once and then you would immediately get there. Yeah, to the next. Yeah. Why the break? I don't know, just demotivated, I guess. I get like that sometimes, you know. I don't really know what it is. But that's just, you know, the way it goes. Okay. So yeah, it's normal. So all of that will be that. We also need to do the same exact thing that we did with this here. So we want to f-write the length of the behavior name. Okay, so that, and then we can just simplify this to this, and then we want to match that. Oh, I don't know why I was trying to skip out on that. Obviously, you need this still. Okay. That matches now. And we obviously need to do the same thing for all of this. We need to create a new NPC component, obviously, with all of this data. Yeah. Don't I have a function that does this? Spawn new NPC component? I do. Hold on. You obviously want to do ent. There you go. And then you want to assert that this is this. And then, yeah, so for everywhere where we have ID, which is a lot, we need to do the same thing, the same pattern with the int length. So Okay. There. Like that for all of them. It's kind of annoying, but yeah, I have to copy this down and kind of just like go through the motions with it, which isn't exactly riveting, I know, but it's necessary. I am going to get out of here in a few moments though, because I need to get ready for this appointment. I want to make sure that I don't make a typo here though. So we're gonna try to take it slowly. Because I know if I make a typo here, then I'm gonna be scratching my head about it. Okay. I remember there's this guy in here that was like, "Can you please stop doing this? Can you stop doing this? And can you please just use the shortcuts?" Like, so the reason why I do this is like because doing this feels a lot more natural to me than doing this. For whatever reason, it just does. So sorry if that annoys you. Okay. Obviously, also, these counts need to happen beforehand, obviously. Because we need to know how much we're iterating. Please tell me that that's... Okay, there we go. Okay. And the attack count is the same thing. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to f-read the attack count and then do the same thing with the IDs for the attacks. And then I'm going to get out of here. And I feel bad because I haven't tested anything, any of this stuff that I've been kind of, you know, designing today. But Yeah. Is what it is. I do have to get out of here though. Okay. If I wrote all this correctly, that should write all of the currently important entity data to binary and then read it out. It's in order, batched by asset, right? And so when we are loading the game, our game state, we are going to load in our assets in that order and then spawn them to the same slot that we saved them from. You know, yeah. And that is going to encompass everything, including the static geometry. Everything is an entity, because when I load in assets, I spawn the geometry, etc. You know, it's all references to assets at the end of the day. So yeah. Okay. To my eyes, it looks all correct. Maybe, you know, when I'm less tired, I'll figure out that I messed something up here, but I think it looks good. So next time, I guess we're gonna test this. I'm sure that there's some issues with it that we're gonna have to figure out how to fix. We're gonna test the saving, loading, and then we have to make the editor system that, excuse me, can change all of this data. Like this is all still kind of like hard-coded data. We don't really have an interface to do that inside of the editor yet. So we want inside of the editor to be able to spawn new asset instances and then move them around and change their stats and stuff inside of their components and blah 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 blah, you know. And that'll be cool because then you'll be able to select entities, move them around, spawn new instances of them, you know, place them, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think in my head, like, what the whole editor loop is going to look like after this, because you definitely want to save the original positions of entities and stuff while you're like editing, and then you're going to like jump into like the simulation, right? And then you want to, when you go back into editor mode, you want everything to the place that it was. So I'm wondering if every time we exit editor mode, we save. I think that might be what we have to do. And then just every time we enter editor mode, reload. That might be what we have to do. Or design some system that saves simply all of the data in memory when we exit editor mode and then replaces it. We'll have to do some testing with that and see what's the most efficient way to do that. Okay, well, I have to leave, unfortunately. So, hope to be live again soon. I think it's mainly just getting back in the habit of it, But, yeah. So sorry if anybody hears one of the people that I haven't responded to your YouTube comment about. I'll do that tonight. But yeah, I just had a lot of anxiety since I was gone for so long and about coming back. But yeah, it's good to be back. But yeah, I definitely, I think a part of why I lost motivation is just I don't know. It's a lot of work for very little I think it's really cool and I really enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it, but sometimes it does kind of get you down when you kind of look at the scope of it and all that stuff, So yeah. What's the game called? I kind of have a work in progress name, which is called The Rest. That's what it's called in my mind. But I don't have an official name for it. I mean, I haven't really. All of it's kind of in my head, what the characters look like. I suck at drawing, so I've drawn the characters a billion times in this notebook of mine, and they always come out looking wrong. But stuff like that, so, it isn't really a thing yet, since I'm still. Obviously, there's a lot of work that I still have to do on the engine, right? But I'm getting there. I also keep getting questions about if it's open source or not. And it's I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if there would be legality problems with me open sourcing some of this stuff, since there's stuff that I've just straight up copied from other people, especially shader code. Maybe that's it, is I just don't upload the shader code, but also I don't know. It's open sourcing something like this, where so much of it is just my own stuff is I don't know. It's different than open sourcing a tool that you originally meant to be something to show off your coding abilities, and everything is neatly commented out and documented, and with something like this, I mean genuinely, if I were to open source it and you were to like look at the code, you wouldn't know what the fuck is going on. Like, if I'm being completely honest, you would know, you would like not understand any of it. Like, you know, for example, you would enter into this file called map.c and there's 6,000 lines inside of it. Like, you know, so yeah. It is like that. It's just like, you know, I do eventually want to get like a job in programming, I think. And it's like, what are the steps that I need to take to do that? Well, I need to like be able to show off what I've programmed, and none of it is show offable because I didn't really make it with the intention of it being show offable, you know? Because I find that shit so boring. You know, the whole documenting thing so goddamn boring. So yeah. I mean, even beyond that, I just feel pretty, I guess, straight up insecure about like making my code 100% public, you know? For a project this big, you know? There's a lot in it that wasn't done properly, you know? That needs to be fixed. Anyway, I'm gonna head off now. Feel free to join the Discord if you're into this stuff. And yeah. Take care. I hope to be back soon and not in another 2 weeks again. Don't really know if I'm really in, you know, if I'm in control of that, but you know, I will try my best, as always. All right, peace out. Thanks for watching. All right, have a good day.